Hello everybody, I'm Cameron and welcome back to another Python lesson. Today we're going to be talking about creating your own variables. So in the past couple videos we've been working with different data types. We've done strings, so we did like a word like that, or we've done numbers, but what if we want to store these into a variable that we could access at a later point in our code? We could actually create a variable. So I'm going to start with making a variable. I'm going to call it my variable. So in making a variable, we have to make the name. Now, there's certain naming conventions you must follow. You're allowed to use letters or numbers in your variable. What you cannot do is start it with a number. So if I want to say my variable 1, and we're just going to set this equal to 10 now, so it won't give us an error. That's fine, but if we do 1 variable, that's not going to work because Python gets a little bit confused. It expects the first thing to be a character. Now, you guys might have also noticed that I used a particular naming convention. If any of you guys have programmed in any other language before, you might recognize this. For those of you who are new, I'll explain this to you right now. So I actually used Camel Case in this. So Camel Case is a naming convention that's very common, especially in Python, in which a variable that has multiple words, you start out with lowercase. So you always want to start out with lowercase for variables. That's a very common practice, no matter which convention you use for naming. You start out with, so my variable. Notice how then the second word, you go with capital. So my variable. If I were to have 3 words, let's say I want to call this my first variable. There we go. So my starts out with lowercase, but then to signify that you have a new word, the first letter of that word is capital, and then you do that again, and you do that again, and it's called camel case because it's like humps on a camel's back. See how the lowercase, then capital, and there you go. So there we go. We created a variable here. So we use that equal sign. It has to be a single equal sign, and then we could have that followed by a number, like here, or we could have it a string. We can even have it a mathematical operation. So let's do that. We'll talk more about mathematical operations in the next video, but here's just a basic one, 10 plus 5, and there we go. So if I wanted to print, let's print my variable 1. There we go. Let's go ahead and we'll run this. We get 15 from that because that's putting 10 plus 5, and it's storing that in this variable, and then we could access it later. We could also do print my first variable. Let's try that. We'll see what we get. Run, and we get hello. Now another thing, I'd like to go over another naming convention that's also commonly used, and that's going to be underscores. So if I wanted to make my first variable with underscores, we would go, we don't even need to use capitals here, we would go my first variable. And I'm just going to make it the same exact thing, but that is another very common naming convention that you could use. My preference is Camel Case, so that's what I'm going to be doing throughout these guides. But if you want to go ahead and you want to use underscores instead for your variables, feel free to do so because that is just as widely accepted. The only thing, though, that I will stress is that whichever naming convention you choose, you should maintain at least throughout one particular file that you're working on. So if you're working on a program and you start with underscores, you should do underscores for the whole entire thing. Likewise with Camel Case. You don't want to be going back and forth because it makes it confusing. But for the purposes of this video, let's take a look and we'll run this. I'm going to just get rid of this code. So we're just worrying about that right now. And look, that works just fine. So using underscores, that's okay. I don't believe you want to start out with an underscore though. Does that work? Let's see. That might actually work. Oh, look at that. All right, you can start out with an underscore, but don't do that, guys. It'll let you start out, but you always want to start out with a letter, particularly a lowercase one. So there you go, guys. That's making variables. You could also, another thing I'd like to mention is that you are able to modify variables after you created them. So let's say we have hello. Let's do my first variable equals hi. We're going to change the value to hi. And there we go. It prints out hi. So we could change the value of my first variable like that. Same works with numbers. It doesn't matter. Python, you could even switch types. So if we started out with my first variable equals 10, and then we want to change it. Well, I want to change it from an integer to a string that says hi. Let's try running it, and it works. So there you go, guys. That's pretty much all you need to know right now about creating variables. I hope this video is a big help. Let me know if you have any questions down below in the comments, and I'll be happy to help you guys. See you in the next one.